Hi, everybody. Welcome to Google I/O. I'm Vlad. I'm the lead product manager for the Google Assistant for the next billion users. I must tell you, this is a hugely rewarding project. Day to day, we get to see how the Google Assistant is improving the lives of the users in emerging countries by giving them easy and intuitive access to information and helping them getting things done. Our team is super passionate about building the right product to empower these users and give them confidence and independence in using technology through the Google Assistant.
Hey, I'm Sachit. I work on developer relations for the Google Assistant. So I've been working on this product consistently for the last 3 years, and it's because I believe in the power of intelligent experiences and new paradigms of computing. These innovations are going to empower and transform the lives of the next billion users. Building for these regions, it's an issue that's close to my heart. While I've been working here, I've had the privilege of traveling to regions where the next billion internet users are coming online, like Brazil and India. And I've witnessed firsthand the extraordinary courage that developers in those regions are showing in betting on new technologies to serve their local communities. And also specifically, as an Indian American, someone who has strong roots in a foreign culture and has had the privilege of spending much of my life with family in other countries, I care about bringing Google's best technology to everyone. And I think based on what you see here today, you will agree with me, Actions on Google is the perfect way to do that.
Thanks. OK, first of all, what is Actions on Google? So let's start with the Google Assistant. The Google Assistant is a conversation between you and Google to help you get more done in your world. It works on a variety of voice-enabled home devices and on the vast majority of mobile phones. Now, Actions on Google is the platform that enables you developers to build your apps for the Google Assistant. Today, there are more or less 7.5 billion people in the world, and only slightly more than half of them are connected to the internet. So 3.5 billion people are not connected yet. Now, as the connectivity grows and the prices of the connected mobile phones go down, more and more of these people are getting connected and are coming online. The talk today is about two things. First, it is about why Actions on Google is a great way to build for these users. And secondly, we'll get into some details and give you some tips about how you can build for them. Let us see now why Actions on Google is a really good way to build for the new users coming online for the first time. So the new users are going to be different. They're going to be less urban and more peri-urban and rural. They will be less fluent in English, have a lower income. They will be very diverse in terms of age and gender. But more importantly for developers, they will have vastly different digital habits. So they have much less pre-established ways of how to use technology, internet, and how they access information. They don't have the legacy of many, many years of using internet first on computers, then after that on smartphones, and seeing it evolve, like many of us here. They are basically thrown into a new digital world without much pre-existing knowledge, and they're very likely to leapfrog the ways that we use technology. Now, we're seeing that the voice user interface is resonating really, really well with these users. And this shouldn't be a surprise. Voice is the most intuitive and, you can say, most natural human interface. There is no need to read manuals. You just speak and ask what you want, almost like you would do with a friend. Everybody knows how to do it. In fact, in the countries where many users are coming online, we are seeing that the Google Assistant, with its voice-first, very intuitive user interface, is being adopted very rapidly. In fact, in countries like India, Brazil, Indonesia, and Mexico, the number of active users of the Google Assistant grew 7 times last year. OK, these new users are also different in terms of the devices they use. Okay? They use Android devices, which have huge adoption everywhere. But also recently very popular is the Android Go edition. This is an optimized version of Android developed from the ground up for devices with 1 gig or less of RAM, and designed to still offer a snappy and great user experience also on these entry-level smartphones. This platform is growing very fast, and today roughly 70% of entry-level Android devices is activating with Go. Big OEMs like Nokia, Motorola, Samsung, Xiaomi, all have already launched devices with Android Go. These new internet users also use a new nascent category of smart feature phones. These are phones with less memory, less resources, that have no touchscreen, but they are fully connected to the internet. These phones are available at a lower price point, and they're also seeing a great adoption, with millions of users using them to get to the internet for the first time. Now, for these phones that don't have a modern touchscreen, the voice interface makes an even bigger difference to get things done. This is even more true for many languages for which it's really, really hard to type on a T9 keyboard, like, for example, Hindi and other Indian languages. So these new devices really are voice first, we can tell. So Action on Google allows you to leverage the voice interface of the Google Assistant for your apps. We've talked a lot about how voice is a very effective way for the users in these emerging markets to use their phone technology and internet. However, implementing voice is really, really hard. And there is a reason that is only recently getting a large adoption. And the reason is that basically only in recent years, we have all the right technological pieces to actually do it well. Let us give a quick look into some of the things that we need to get right. So speech recognition, let us start there. So here we need to basically understand what is the user pronouncing. We need to reliably transform speech into text. And we have done huge progress there. So to measure the accuracy of speech recognition, we use a metric that is called word error rate. This metric basically tells us out of 100 words that we recognize, how many did we get wrong, right? So just some years back, 2013, for American English, word error rate was 23%. This basically means that out of every 4 words, we would misrecognize 1. And this makes it then really difficult then to understand what is the user actually trying to say, right? We've done a lot of progress since then. So 2015, the metric, so word error rate was at 8%. And today, for American English, it is below 5%. This means basically that out of 20 words, we recognize correctly more than 19. So this is really a huge difference. And we are working hard all the time to improve speech recognition across all languages. We notice that when people start talking to their devices, something really interesting happens. So something switches, and somehow naturally they start, even if it's just devices, they start talking to the devices in a very conversational way. So instead of weather Delhi, like many people would usually ask Google, they start saying things like, hey, could you please let me know what is the weather going to be in Delhi like tomorrow? It gets even more difficult, since human conversation is heavily biased on context. But when people talk to devices, they also refer to what has been said previously in dialogue, what is around them, and all of this makes it really hard for us to actually understand the meaning behind the words that the user is saying, right? Basically, to understand the intent of the user. Lastly, languages. To be really helpful, we need to speak the languages that the users actually speak. And we need to understand what the user is saying across a variety of languages and accents. And the Google Assistant today is a real language multi-talent and speaks now nearly 30 languages. All this is possible because of some unique strengths that Google has in voice, in particular in the fields like deep learning, natural language understanding, and understanding user context. So by using Actions on Google, again, you can leverage this expertise for your apps. Continuing on languages, Actions on Google is now available in many of the Google Assistant languages, including some of the top languages spoken in the countries where most people are coming online today. And again, we always work to extend the list of the supported languages. Let me summarize why Actions on Google is a great way to build for the next billion users coming online. So with one implementation, you reach a diverse set of users across different devices. Not only you reach all of these users, but you reach them in a way that resonates with them through the voice interface. And you leverage the Google expertise on speech, dialogue, and languages. Let us now look at some awesome developers. I'll very quickly introduce some nice examples and to illustrate some opportunities in some verticals, like education, hyperlocal information, health, and games. Okay. Hello English has a highly successful language learning mobile app and has created a fantastic action available in English and Hindi. The action has a persona called Madhu Sharma that helps the users learn English. This action has been very successful and illustrates the hunger of these users to learn and better themselves, and the opportunities, the huge opportunities in the education vertical. Where is My Train is a super handy utility for tracking trains across the extensive rail network in India, with millions of installed on Google Play. With the action on Google, it enables users to check their train just using their voice. So for example, they can say, ask where is my train to locate the Hyperdead Express. This example shows how actions providing hyperlocal relevant information can be very relevant to users and provide real value to their lives. Colgate Kids is a very nice action launched in Brazilian Portuguese that teaches kids how to wash their teeth properly, with explanation and the music of the right duration. It's an example of the opportunities in the health vertical. Galinha Pintadinha have a super successful YouTube channel. Their action in Brazilian Portuguese allows kids to get in touch with their favorite character. They can talk to Galinha, and she'll answer with her already famous voice. They can play games like Memory or recognize characters from the shadows, or listen to Galinha's most famous songs. It shows the opportunities in the games vertical. Another great game example is Chota Bheem. Chota Bheem is a very popular kids character in India. For the launch of their latest movie, Chota Bheem Kung Fu Dhamaka, they have built a personality quiz where kids can answer a series of questions in the movie universe. Okay, I'll close my short list of examples with ClickBuzz, which is the go-to platform to consume cricket-related content. ClickBuzz launched an action on Google using templates. This action is a nice example of how you can implement high-quality experiences by super quickly by just using templates. Let us now talk about what makes these experiences great for users and how you can build for them.
So we've seen some great use cases here that have demonstrably proven real value in the lives of users in these markets. And clearly, there's an immense opportunity here. But let's talk about actually getting our hands dirty and building for these users. So the first thing to consider is the client devices. So what are they actually holding in their hands? Well, in many of these regions, users can buy Google Homes or other assistant-enabled third-party smart speaker devices. These are designed for the assistive experience at home. They're stationary, and they're always ready to help. This has dedicated hardware, and it's usually a shared device, commonly used by families. Now, in the mobile world, first and foremost is Android. So Assistant already has a huge presence on the well-established Android ecosystem. And this is the full intermodal Assistant and Actions on Google experience without limitations. So users on these devices, they tend to be more experienced with mobile and internet technologies. And with this hardware, they might already be your customer on another platform like Google Play. And also common in these regions are our Android Go devices. So Android Go Edition is an optimized version of Android. It was launched in 2017. And it's built for devices with 1 GB or less of RAM. So it comes with a suite of optimized Google apps, including the Google Assistant. And this allows more users to join the Android ecosystem. So the great news here is that your actions will be available on these devices soon with no extra work on your part. Now, this brings us to some of the cheapest devices running Google Assistant. And these are smart feature phones. So these are extremely affordable devices. They're as low as $20 US. And they run a light operating system called KaiOS. Now, they may remind you of some of our handsets, the most premier handsets from 15 or 20 years ago. But these phones can do so much more. They're Wi-Fi and 4G enabled, and they're often sold with generous data plans that can prorate the entire cost of the device. And they also come with apps from users' favorite internet services, including Google Maps, Search, and of course, Google Assistant. And the great news here is, just like with Android Go, your actions will be available on these devices with no extra work on your part. Now, the user experience is similar to a smart speaker, so it's voice only. But for this new generation of internet users who are unburdened by the habits and mental models of graphic UIs, this is an unbelievable chance to generate confidence in your service by living on the Assistant. So let me reiterate the value here. Right? You build one action, one common code base in the cloud of your choice, and your service is going to live across all of these devices for all of these users. And with the Android or smart speaker devices, you can build for the complete Actions on Google experience. You can have users sign in to your service and link their account. You can even sell goods in supported regions. However, as we're just launching for Android Go and KaiOS devices, there will be some limitations to consider. So in particular, we won't be supporting transactions or account linking, and KaiOS will only support actions in Indian English and Hindi. But we remain committed to bringing feature parity across these devices going forward. All right, so we know what the next billion users will be holding in their hands and what they'll be speaking to. So now let's actually consider what you can build for them. If you want to get started building great actions today, build with Actions templates. It's that simple. We have a few different varieties to choose from. And if you already have interesting content that you want to get out there to users, or you want to have some fun and come up with something new, templates give you an out-of-the-box solution to entering your content into a Google Sheet and producing a high-quality action without writing a single line of code. In fact, all of you can go home and do this today. And the trivia quiz and flashcards templates work in 11 languages, including the ones where we're seeing growth amongst the next billion users. So this includes Spanish, localized to both Europe and Latin America, as well as Hindi, Brazilian Portuguese, and Indonesian, with more languages coming soon. You know, we've already seen success with these use cases in regions where the next billion users are coming online, which is also where entertainment and games are a common use of technology. So templates are a great solution to use now. Now, you might remember the example that Vlad gave earlier, CrickBuzz. They built an awesome Cricket quiz action using templates. So I want to show you how easy it is to build something similar. So all I did was I created a project at console.actions.google.com, and I clicked Templates. And it got me to this sheet. So I literally just typed in a bunch of questions and some configuration information, like the difficulty levels for all of those questions. And then boom, I've got as good an experience as what CrickBuzz was able to make. And it's complete with sound effects and error cases handled. You can go from 0 to 100 with templates. And like I've said, we've seen these do really well with the next billion users. So build one today. Seriously, within hours, you can have a production-ready action to deploy. Now, if you're not looking to build trivia quiz or flashcards solution, consider building a conversation action. So this gives you complete control of the dialogue with the user, allowing you to express your brand as you want. And it creates a frictionless way for users to get things done, learn about their world, or have some fun with your service. Conversation actions are triggered by users. They're usually done by asking for you specifically to the assistant by name, or just saying what they want to do. And from there, you go back and forth with the user until the action ends the dialogue or the user cancels out. So what I have up here is an example of the action that was built for this year's Google I/O. And you can all try this today if you have the assistant on your phones. Just say, hey, Google, talk to Google I/O'19. So I encourage you to try this one out. Now, the question is, how do you handle that complicated dialogue control and that natural language understanding, or NLU? So Dialogflow is Google's answer. And your action can be backed by a Dialogflow agent, including utilities for matching everything the user says throughout the dialogue to intents. This is done with machine learning, and it's trained by just a few example phrases that you provide. Just 10 to 12 is enough. And this also includes built-in conversational modeling for situations that require repair, like when the user says something that you don't recognize. And all of this can be customized for different languages. So for those of you who are already building conversation actions, you're probably already familiar. But for anyone new, you can learn a lot more in our other talks about Assistant, or you can jump into one of our code labs here at I/O, or maybe if you're on the live stream at home on your sofa at codelabs.developers.google.com. So I encourage you to try that out. Now, beyond the purely conversational aspect of these custom conversational actions, you can now leverage the power of interactive canvas to engage the next billion users on their Android devices. So this is how Chota Beam was able to create their visually impressive and brand-consistent Kung Fu Damaka action. And you can learn more about this today. There's a talk at 4:30, so check it out. So let's say you are building your own conversational experience. How should you build it differently for the next billion users? Remember, conversational interaction is the first major technology that, in the ideal, assumes no prior knowledge on the part of the user in terms of understanding UI elements. There's no need, for instance, to understand a hamburger menu. And this is especially important for the next billion users, some of whom haven't learned this and really shouldn't have to. And I want you to think about that as we make our way through the next few slides. So firstly, a lot of the same basics apply for the next billion as for the first billion. And you can learn a lot more about this in a talk tomorrow at 2:30. But the main takeaway I want you all to have here is that conversation is new for everyone. So consider these basics. The first thing is consider your persona ahead of time and draft dialogues with it in mind. Conversation is inherently personal, so express it through your prompts. Now, this doesn't mean you have to stretch out your prompts and shove a persona in there, but use it when you're considering the word choice and the tone, etc. Persona should be based on your user population, their local culture, their jargon, their slang. Consider it an opportunity to build a truly localized experience. You'll also want to consider context-sensitive repair. So this means identifying all the possible error conditions throughout your dialogue when a user might not understand what's needed of them, speech recognition errors, and moving between dialogue paths unexpectedly, and proactively build in prompts to guide your user to a productive state in the dialogue. So let me give you a quick example. In one of our samples that we launched on GitHub, we allow the user to hear facts about either Google's history or its headquarters. So the question we asked the user is, do you want to hear about history or headquarters? Now, we expected the user to say one of the two, but sometimes they would say yes or no, because it's technically a yes or no question. So we changed the prompt from, do you want to hear facts about this or that, to which do you prefer, which changes the question from a confirmation question to a disambiguation question. So these are the kind of things to consider. Now, I say error conditions here, but truly, in conversation, there are no errors. The user is attempting cooperation, so you need to repay that with thorough dialogue design. And then when you're supporting a screen device, you can use that to your advantage. Remember, you can check whether the device supports screen output at runtime, and you can use this to determine whether to present the user with some visual selection options, like suggestion shapes or lists or carousels. Now, this is vital for users around the world, but especially for those who might be unfamiliar with conversational interfaces. And then for devices that rely less on visual output, like smart feature phones and smart speakers, consider the full range of the audible experience. Utilize SSML, or speech synthesis markup language, to create a richer experience by adding custom audio and marking up the TTS for customized speech delivery. All right, so we've covered the basics of conversation design. So let's talk about some of the specifics of designing your prompts for the next billion users. Now, the first thing is to keep your prompts short and to the point. So except in the case of gaming, users are likely not looking for long, drawn-out interactions. If the user is on Android, you need to prove that you can complete the task faster than using an app. And if they're on a smart feature phone, that user is hostage to your prompt until it ends. So don't make them regret invoking your action. And the second aspect of this is don't leave your prompts open to interpretation. Reduce ambiguity and user frustration with short prompts that ask for exactly what you need the user to say to progress in the dialogue. So one example from Where's My Train is that they taper their greeting for return users with a shortened prompt. And this is actually a general best practice. And we have utilities built into the platform for saving information about the user across dialogues. And they use the information they already have about the user here to suggest the next turn of dialogue, and they give an explicit yes/no question to progress. Now, another tip for users who might be unfamiliar with smart assistive experiences is to give them a handhold into the conversation. Prompt them proactively. Get to know them and their preferences, and surface the right behavior from your action accordingly. Leaving your prompts open-ended and relying on the user to find the functionality that they need, it can be frustrating, and it's a missed opportunity to intelligently engage. So keeping your prompts short and to the point and proactively understanding the user increases the likelihood of matching your Dialogflow agent's training phrases and providing a better experience. All right, so speaking of training phrases, let's talk about how to design your Dialogflow agent or other natural language understanding solution to handle the next billion users' languages. Last year at Google for India, we talked about some of the really powerful features we're working on to understand the way that your users will speak. And this includes understanding, for instance, both Hindi and English for a single user. And you all can leverage these investments in speech recognition in your actions as well. So one scenario to consider is mixed language use or code switching in a single utterance. And it turns out this is a pretty common phenomenon in non-English languages, especially amongst bilingual users. So let's look at an example of this in Hindi. So in Hindi, one way to ask for the time is kitne baje hai. Forgive my pronunciation, I'm still learning. But you could also say kya time hua hai or kya time hua. Now here, the user is literally introducing the English word time in their utterance. So how does this get handled in your action? Normally, when you're handling Hindi input, you can expect Devanagari script, and the same happens to be true here. The word time gets transliterated into Hindi and passed through using the same characters. Your Dialogflow agent will receive these characters, and you can include them in your intent training phrases. All right, but what about proper nouns or other words? Let's look at another example. So imagine the user asks, what is the GDP of India? Or Bharat ki GDP kya hai? Now, in this case, GDP gets transliterated into the literal sounds of GDP. And every user speaks differently, and they're always going to choose different words and phrases. And we might understand them differently. So this is why it's really important to actually test your action with users in the real world and understand how they say things. And to keep an eye on your Dialogflow logs and your analytics to see how users are expressing themselves when they're using your action. But there are exceptions to this. So typed input and suggestionship content will be passed through as is. And the other thing to keep in mind is your action's output, or TTS, can use multiple languages in certain cases. So this means you can better mirror the user's natural mixed language use in the action itself. So let's see how Hello English handles code switching in their action for learning English, excuse me. So in Dialogflow, you train a natural language understanding module by supplying training phrases for all of the intents or turns of dialogue in your conversation. So the training phrases provide examples of what your user might say when they're actually expressing that intent. And Dialogflow uses machine learning to match what users say in real time throughout the dialogue to the example phrases you provided. So let's look at the choose lesson intent in Hello English. So this is the intent that gets triggered in the dialogue when they're choosing from a series of lessons that they want to do. And Hello English offers a few ways to select a lesson for Hindi users. So one way is to speak Hindi out loud, and they've covered that with the bottom 3 training phrases. So in there, they cover a couple of ways to say the word lesson, including the word pat in Hindi, as well as the transliteration of the English word lesson. But you'll also notice the English word for lesson in Latin characters right in their training phrases. So why is this? It's because their suggestion chips use English text to further help their students learn the language. And suggestion chip text is passed directly to Dialogflow as is. So when it's selected, it should match this intent. So they have to include it in their training phrases. All right, so now we've talked about trying to cover all your bases when it comes to training your natural language understanding module. But you should still plan for unexpected situations. So as you might remember, Vlad mentioned earlier, we've really invested heavily and made significant progress in automatic speech recognition. But it may still be weak on some of these devices with hardware constraints and with different accents and different dialects and different levels of technology exposure. Users are likely to cause false positives in speech recognition. And on top of that, it's important to anticipate the context of your user. Maybe they're in a noisy environment and you can't expect perfect speech recognition. So let's see how Hello English again handled a case like this. So again, taking us back to the example from earlier, in their choose lesson intent, you'll notice I've drawn attention to a new training phrase. And this is the Hindi word for garlic, lahasun, because it sounds similar to lesson. And this means that their Dialogflow agent is prepared to handle the Hindi transliteration of lesson and the speech recognition mismatch for lahasun. Now, one of the last points I want to make when it comes to building a great user experience is that you should really consider smart feature phones separately. This is a new product segment with its own user experience and user needs. And as I mentioned, there will be some limitations at launch, like account linking and physical transactions. But there are still opportunities for your action, like having your directory page living in our assistant directory, specially designed for these phones. And we'll be supporting smart feature phones in the Actions console simulator, since testing on device won't be supported. Now, when it comes to the user experience, you can think of the smart feature phone experience as similar to the smart speaker experience, except that it's on the go and accessible anywhere. Now, because of that, like I mentioned earlier, you want to keep things short. People don't want to listen to long prompts, and they need to know exactly what to say afterwards to reduce friction. But also, like I said earlier, this also means if you've built for a voice-only experience in Indian English or Hindi, your action is going to be living on these KaiOS devices at no extra cost to you. And like with all actions, there's no installation, meaning users don't have to worry about space limitations on these phones to download your app. And similar to a smart speaker, the smart feature phone experience is voice only. Keyboard input won't work. And anyway, the keyboard experience on these phones isn't always as flexible as touchscreen smartphones. In fact, many users prefer voice input and even video calling to texting. So this means you should tailor your expected input to voiceable queries. So for instance, let's say you're building an action against an API that takes a postcode to pull some information about a city. Rather than expecting this data directly from the user in the form of a number value subject to all sorts of speech recognition issues, introduce a layer of abstraction by asking for the city directly and doing the reverse geocoding on your end, or ideally get an API that accepts a city name. And another example of this is where's my train? So it turns out train numbers can be pretty hard to remember and to speak out. So they handle input by either the train number or the train name. So for example, the Hyderabad Express for train 12603. All right, so we've talked a lot about design and dialogue considerations to make when building for the next billion users. But now let's talk about creating localized experiences in your user's language. Now there are 3 touch points for you to make these changes: the Actions console, dialog flow, and in your fulfillment logic. And the great thing is, we've already localized Actions on Google in some of the main countries where Assistant is seeing heavy traffic, particularly Hindi and Indian English in India, Brazilian Portuguese, Latin American Spanish, as well as Spanish as spoken in Spain, and Indonesian. Now, for the first touch point, in the Actions console, again at console.actions.google.com, by the way, this is where you can get an overview of your project and even try it out in different languages. You can click the Languages tab under Settings to select all the languages that you want to support. And the other option you have in the Actions console is Release Targeting. So this is where you can select or limit the countries in which you want users to be able to invoke your actions. So suppose your service only makes sense in Mexico because it provides local information to users there. Well, then you can just target Mexico. Or maybe it makes sense only in a few countries. In that case, we support launching in any subset of the countries where Actions on Google is available. Now, the next step is to update your dialog flow agent. So there's a few parts to this. The first thing to recognize is that all of your intents remain the same between your supported languages. So you don't have to reconstruct your dialogue in each language. However, you do need to train dialog flow for the different types of phrases people may speak in the different languages that you choose. And this includes the entities you support. So for instance, if you're writing an agriculture action, and in English, you can listen for different fruit types like apples and bananas, you'll need to translate these expected values in your Spanish-speaking model. So manzanas y plátanos. Now let's talk about how we actually do this in our back-end logic. So let's suppose your Actions persona was a friend in your neighborhood who can help you fix appliances in your house. For this example, by the way, I'll be using Node.js with our Actions on Google client library, and I'm going to be deploying to Cloud Functions for Firebase. But you can write your fulfillment code in any language of your choice, deployed on any infrastructure you might choose, Google Cloud or not. There are no requirements. But if you are using Node, let's pretend that you have the response prompts for your action, so that is the actual output for your user, stored in some JSON files. And you can create one for each language. So in the very simple example I have here, I have a greeting prompt and a response for when the user needs help. And it's localized for users in English, as well as Latin American Spanish, or ES419, and European Spanish. And the main difference between the Spanish locales are the words for computer and television. Now, the response is keyed by the type of the response, so greeting, for instance, and the value is the response string itself. And these kind of files make it really easy to manage all of your prompts and localization data separately from your webhook logic. And there are even translation services out there that can help you localize your prompts to different languages. All right, so then let's suppose I'm actually writing out my JavaScript code in a file called index.js. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import a library for internationalization. And in this case, I'm using I18 and Node, which is available on NPM. But there are plenty of libraries available out there for most of the programming languages that you might use, and many of them have similar features to what I'll be showing here. So here what I'll do is I'll configure the module so that it knows where my localized responses are. So I'm keeping them in a directory called locales. And in this case, I'm also configuring it to fall back to my Latin American prompts for users in Mexico and in the United States, because maybe these prompts didn't need special localizations for those users. And then finally, I've got a utility function. It's called setLocale, and it allows me to change the locale I want to use at runtime. All right, so let's see how I'm going to use that later on in my webhook logic. Now, when you're building an action using Node.js, again, we recommend using our Actions on Google client library. It's available on NPM. I have the command there. And if you want to understand how to use it better, I highly recommend checking out our other samples on GitHub. We have a variety of samples there. We also have a library in Kotlin, And you can find samples that use Java on GitHub as well. But here, I'm importing this client library module for Node.js, and I'm using it based on a Dialogflow configuration, and I'm initializing it here. And then I'm going to write some middleware, which calls the setLocale function that we wrote earlier. And this runs for every turn of dialog that gets handled. So right before we respond to the user, we tell the I18N module which language or locale the current user is speaking in. And then finally, when you're responding to the user, I can use the I18N __ function to pull the response from the appropriate JSON file based on the key designated there. All right, so again, just to recap, the key steps are: 1, create localized versions of your prompt strings and encapsulate them somewhere separate from your application logic. 2, configure your I18N module for any fallbacks you need or any other configuration. And 3, read your prompt strings from these JSON files at runtime using some unique identifiers. And then the last thing you'll want to do after you've implemented and tested your localized action using our web simulator is you'll want to create a localized directory entry. So all of the available third-party actions on our platform, they live in the assistant directory. And this is available online at assistant.google.com/explore, but also on the Assistant app on all of the devices that we've talked about here today. And so for each language you support, you can add different information that'll show up there, including the description, any branding images, and even the privacy policy. And that's it. That's all you need to do to create a localized experience. Now, again, I recommend starting with templates. We've seen actions that use templates. They do really well, and it's a great starting point in understanding our platform. But you can create these highly customized experiences yourself as well. Now, I want to close by talking about the opportunity here. Actions on Google is the platform for reaching the next billion users. It enables you to reach all of your users on the devices that they use, including smart feature phones, in the interaction paradigm that works for them. For some of these users, it'll be their first time interacting with your brand or your service, so make a great first impression. Users in emerging markets are adopting voice and conversation quickly. That's why it's so important to jump in now. You all have the local insights and understanding to build the services that these users need, and we want to get you there. So build actions supporting the devices connecting these users today, and design your experiences to engage with their world on their terms. Now, you can visit developers.google.com/actions/templates to learn more about templates. You can also check out our localization documentation there, as well as our number Genie sample in both Node.js and Java on GitHub. And then finally, I highly recommend that you check out the documentation we have on the different devices that we've discussed here today at developers.google.com/actions/NBU. Thank you very much.